Welcome to Plastic Model Mojo, a podcast dedicated to scale modeling as well as the news and events around the hobby. Let's join Mike and Kentucky Dave as they strive to be informative, entertaining, and help you keep your modeling mojo alive.
Well, Mojovia, welcome to episode 138 of Plastic Model Mojo, and brought to you live from Soggy Bottom, Kentucky.
God, yes.
Kentucky Dave, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Everything is damp.
That's an understatement.
Yeah.
Well, we're not alone tonight. We got Mr. Jeff Groves, the inside guy in the third chair. Jeff, how you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm good, Mike. Hi, Dave. Hi, everybody out in Mojovia. Still keeping the head above water here in the mighty state of Indiana.
Well, how's things where you are? Is it wet up there too?
It has been wet for the last couple of days. The mighty White River has jumped its banks, but we aren't underwater yet, so we're still doing okay.
Hopefully you live on a hill.
Above the water level in the river, that's for sure.
Well, good. Well, we're going to start with you, Jeff. What's been up in your model sphere of late?
Well, my model sphere of late, just today, was pretty darn enjoyable. Went to the IPMS Roscoe Turner show in Indianapolis.
You're killing me, dude.
Well, if that big red patch of radar wasn't sitting on you this morning, it would have been great to have you guys up there. But
well, I was out from the beginning, but I was sad to hear that Dave had to bail. But go ahead, I interrupt.
No, that's great. It was every bit of a good show, as you remember from ever being there. They had 120 vendor tables. I never did get an entry count, but I would put it a little north of 600 models on the table. Yeah, they have a good policy. It's $10 to get in the door and as many models as you want to bring with you. The guy in line ahead of me had 18.
Yeah.
Well, how many did you have?
I brought 5. I only brought 5.
Okay, well, that's not bad either. It's more than I've ever brought to a model show.
But it was a good time.
4 years' work for me.
Yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad you had a good time. Was the crowd good despite the weather? I don't know how the weather up toward Indianapolis has been. I would imagine not a whole lot different.
It's pretty much what you guys had, just a few hours later. The drive down was not bad at all. We got there probably 20 minutes before the door opened, and I was looking at the parking lot. I thought, oh, man, there's been a lot of guys that were held up, but they all showed up.
Yeah.
And it filled up. It filled up nice. There were 3 estates in the vendor room where guys were liquidating from modelers we've lost. And
one of those was our Special Agent 003, Brandon Jacobs.
Okay.
Who had
Texas.
Yeah, from Texas. He and a friend went up and bought a 1,700 kit collection.
They were there, I'm telling you.
Yeah.
They were blowing them out. They were trying to
were.
not go home with piles of stuff, and it showed.
Yeah. Speaking of that, did you buy some stuff? You sent me some pictures.
Oh, Dave, I tell you, I was a bad boy. I've been feeling guilty because the Sprue Brothers had a pretty good discount. I think it was 30% off if you bought over a certain limit. So, of course, I got to that limit and got my 30% off, and I thought, okay, I'm done buying. And that lasted until this show.
Oh, for a minute, you had me thinking they were at the show.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
That was a mail order thing, but they had a lot of fine mold kits that you rarely find, let alone find on sale, and they had marked them down. But I sent Dave a box of 72nd scale, mostly Japanese stuff that was $10 a kit, and it was stuff you don't see all the time.
Now, there was one 48 scale kit in there. What the heck was with that?
Well, you just can't filter them all out.
It's
just that kind of thing. And then at the end of it, I was walking through and a vendor had $10 on a bunch of Dragon armor for $10 each. And they said everything on the table's half off. And I thought, oh, man.
Everett McCallum would have been going hog wild.
Yeah. So I wound up with probably a dozen kits altogether. And I didn't need them. Let me put it that way.
Man, there were a couple of those in that box you sent me that I would have been fighting you for.
Well, I thought if you wanted them, I could have picked you up. I picked up a couple out of that box for me, and there's if you need that Kate, I've got 8 of them on my shelf right now.
I've got more Kates than I know what to do with. But there was that inline nose Judy.
Oh, yeah.
Those are tough to come by.
There were lots of, just everywhere you looked was a good deal, and the vendors were willing to deal, and they did stick around. A lot of shows, when lunch hits, they start packing up, and most of these guys, I'd say 80% of them stayed after lunch and right to the end.
Well, we will talk about that later in our shop talk, because that's a subject of discussion and concern.
Yes, absolutely.
So, well, one more question, Jeff, regarding the Roscoe Turner show. Did it rain while you were there?
Yes. It came and went, and then by the time we left, it got pretty heavy. So the drive home was pretty heavy, but I only live an hour from there. So an hour, that's not too much.
Always thought when we were there in the new place out there in Lebanon, actually, that if it rained hard, it'd almost be deafening inside those pole barns.
It wasn't terrible, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, no way to record, and it's when it's fallen on that pole barn like that.
No, you would have had trouble recording, definitely.
Dave, what's up in your model sphere?
My model sphere is disappointing because I was all set to grab Skippy and to go up to the show. I got a last minute reprieve where I could run up. Everything was hitting on all cylinders. And then yesterday they were predicting bad weather hitting Louisville around 3:00 in the morning. So it looked like it was going to be, the worst was going to be over by, 6 a.m. about the time I'd be getting up and getting ready and all that stuff. And then it just kept hovering and hovering. And the bad stuff was always just to the west and north of us. And I got a hold of Skippy about 6:30, and I'm like, dude, I don't think, with the amount of water and everything else, nobody else is home. I gotta bail. And so I texted with Skippy, and then I texted Inch to let him know. There were a lot of guys I was looking forward to seeing, including Brandon and Agent 001, and it just really disappointing, stacked on top of the fact that I've been a bachelor for the last 4 days, and I was planning on getting a lot of modeling done. But then my dog ate my internet, which screwed up my messed up my work from home situation. And when I say the dog ate my internet, I mean one of my dogs went outside. The cable that runs into the house that brings the internet into the house had fallen down close to the ground, and he decided it was a chew toy. And it killed, Wednesday night, it killed my internet. And I didn't get it restored till Friday, just one thing after another. So I did not get nearly as much modeling done as I had planned to. So I'm still coming off the high of Heritage Con, but I'm a sad puppy as far as the amount of modeling I've gotten done and that I missed the indie show. But on the plus side, I do have a Jeff Groves inspired batch build going on, and that's moving along really well. We'll talk about that later. Mike, how about you?
Well, it's been an interesting week, a couple of weeks. Of course, we got back from Heritage Con. We're about, a week or 2 weeks past that now.
2 weeks past.
I'm losing track of time. It's crazy weather.
I thought today was Sunday.
Well, we've picked up Kit Mass as a sponsor.
Yes.
And that'll roll out starting in May. But we're doing some behind-the-scenes stuff that's really fun with Janelle and Kevin.
Yes.
And really looking forward to launching that and helping them support their business while they help us support the podcast. So that's taken up a little time.
Yeah.
Other than that, not a lot. I mean, that's been most of my modeling adjacent, podcast adjacent kind of stuff.
Well, your work has been busy too.
Yeah, I've been busy at work, but that's okay. It's good. It's good to be busy at work.
Yes.
Busy enough.
Busy enough.
Well, I mean, that's pretty much my model sphere. I just trying to get all that going and thinking ahead a little bit for our scheduling and getting our guests into April and May lined up. And we got some good stuff coming, folks. So
We do.
Stay tuned.
Well, we are recording an episode, and that means modeling fluid. And why don't we start off with Jeff? Because I know this is kind of special modeling fluid for him.
Yeah, well, every modeling fluid's special, isn't it?
True
to some
enough.
degree.
True enough.
Some more than others.
Some more than others.
So what do you got?
I'm going to see if I can do the Kentucky Dave signature bottle open here.
Okay.
Oh, did it come through?
Yep.
There we go. I am having a Blue Moon Belgian White.
Great choice.
Yeah, probably one of my favorite beers, if not the favorite. First beer I've had in several months. I've been fighting some health issues, so I've had to lay off the beer on the recommendation of my physician, and he did say I could cheat once in a while. So this is my cheat beer.
All right. Well, thanks for cheating with us.
Yeah. What about you, Mike? What do you got?
I've got a little Bullet Kentucky bourbon whiskey.
Nice.
I've abstained pretty much almost, well, not quite since Heritage Con. We had one last episode, but
right.
Since last episode, I've not had much of anything. And I went and got this Thursday night and actually went for Russell's 10-year, and they didn't have it again. And I told the clerk about that.
You've made it too popular.
I guess I have.
You personally have made
Folks
that
are
a
catching
popular
on.
one.
So
that's right.
I went for the economy and I picked up the Bullet. Folks know what to think about that.
Oh yeah.
What about you, Dave?
Well, I think I've done this one once before. I've actually got a cocktail tonight. I have a Lime Ricky.
You have done that. That's a long time ago.
A long time ago. A Lime Ricky, at least the way you get a bunch of variations, is gin, Tanqueray in this case, limeade or Italian lime soda, which you can get at Trader Joe's, a little sweet lime, concentrated sweet lime juice, and simple syrup over ice. It's kind of a cousin of a Tom Collins. If you like a Tom Collins, which is lemon-based, you'll like a Lime Ricky, which is lime-based. So I already know I'm going to like this by the end of the show, but we'll wrap it up at the end.
We got to get you up to a Hendrick or a botanist or something.
Well, I like it. I'll tell you, I like aviation gin, but my wife is a Tanqueray fan. So
that's the Jim Beam of gin.
Exactly. That is exactly what it is.
Well, I don't know. That might be Beefeater might be the Jim Beam of gin.
Yeah, this might be Tanqueray's one step up.
Sorry, Steve Husted. Well, we've got some listener mail, Dave. Not a lot, disappointingly. Folks need to step it up. That's what they need to do.
Yep. Email us in. Let us know what you like, what you don't like. Submit wheel questions, submit topics. Keep it coming because, as Mike has said, that's the most enjoyable part of the show for us.
It is, and a lot of these are announcements.
Okay.
Which I guess is okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
There'll be one at the end that's not, which is kind of cool, but we'll go from there. First up, our friend Christian Gurney with Bases by Bill. They've got a new product announcement, and some of our listeners might have heard about this on the Plastic Posse podcast because Christian was a guest on there very, very recently, like earlier this week.
Yes.
They've got a new line of bases that actually inset their carrier deck textured panels into a hardwood or decorative wood base.
Yes.
It makes for a really nice display.
Plus, they're adding new textured bases, concrete, and I think one or two other ones that he was talking about. One of the things I like about Bases by Bill is they are so innovative. They sit there and they think and they go, oh, well, this would be good. And you're just amazed that nobody else has thought of it.
No, that would be very versatile. I think that's a good idea to dress those bases up.
Yep.
Really makes it sharp.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
So, folks, check out Bases by Bill and see what they got going on with these new inset carrier deck bases. Well, our friend Michael Poland down in Knoxville.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe this has been a year already because Brandon Jacob was at Roscoe Turner show with his big pile of kit collection.
Yeah.
By happenstance, he happened to be at the Knoxville Smoky Mountain Model Con last year when I took a detour on a trip down to see my folks with my youngest son. We dodged into Knoxville and took in about an hour of this show last year, and they were part of the model show spotlight last year for this show. So it's coming up again, man. Saturday, May 31st from 9 to 4 at the gym at the Knoxville Catholic High School. And this is a new high school. This is a really, really cool venue, really nice venue. And unfortunately this year I'm going to be away that weekend. So I'm not going to be able to go again. I'd like to, because it looked like a great show, but they've adding a few more vendor tables, and I don't know, they just want us to help promote it. So we're going to do that because they supported the show in the past, and we wish them all the success.
It's a great show, and I just want you to know Agent 003 is everywhere. You never know where or when you're going to run into Brandon Jacobs. He's everywhere.
Well, I hope that Mrs. 003 didn't say, yeah, you can buy those. You're just not coming home till they're all gone.
Yeah. Hey, Brandon, I'd be interested to know if she even knew about it.
Well, and then finally, Dave, from the email side of things, back from a long hiatus is Michael Karnauka from New York City.
Oh, good. I want Michael's question.
Well, Michael wants to know, have we ever sought out or hoped that there was a model kit of a car that you or your parents once owned, or a plane that you flew on, etc.? He has AMT's 76 AMC Gremlin that his dad drove for longer than he should have.
Oh, God.
Which was about 20 minutes.
Yes.
During the late 70s, early 80s, he has no immediate desire to construct it, but one day he's gonna do this. So, Jeff, is there anything like that you can think of?
The only things with cars are, I've occasionally thought they would make a good gift for somebody. If, one of your buddies really, really, really got into one of his cars, that kind of thing. But
oh yeah, I know. Yeah.
Not for me. I mean, a car to me is a utilitarian thing,
Point A to point B.
Yeah. Now, if I was like you and had a model railroading past, I might be inspired to build one of my houses back on a hill somewhere, something like that, a piece of scenery that, this was the house I grew up in. But
interesting.
The thing about that stuff, though, is you well know that once you get to measuring out your house, that thing turns into a monster as a model. You don't think of it as that big, but you put it on a layout or something, and it takes up a lot of space.
What about you, Dave?
Well, both. I've done both.
I think you've got one.
Right. I've got a 94 Supra, and I've got the Tamiya kit of it. I built it once, and I want to build it again. In addition, do either of you remember an airline called Piedmont?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, based in Charlotte, flew all over my part of the country when I was growing up.
Now, this is sometime between 1964 and 1970. So this is all before airline deregulation and all of that. Piedmont was a small regional airline that covered the Carolinas, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, etc. And we were living in Richmond, Virginia at the time. But both my mother and father grew up here in Louisville, and both of our families were here. Both of their parents were here. And I distinctly remember flying on Piedmont on a Fokker F-27, which, if you've ever seen it, is a high-wing twin turboprop aircraft, which there's a kit of, which I have. And this is the way airlines were in the old regulated days. The flight went from Richmond to Norfolk to maybe Charlottesville, Virginia. Then it went into the Tri-Cities in Tennessee.
Yep, that's my home airport.
Yeah. Then it went into, I think, Nashville, Lexington, and Louisville.
Is this a general comment or a Dave's? This is what happened to Dave comment?
No, this is this is the flight that I took. It was like riding on a Greyhound bus that flew, because it stopped in every little airport.
Well, when did they deregulate? Because everything ever flew on Piedmont went to Charlotte is like flying Delta to Atlanta.
Right. Well, they deregulated airlines thanks to Herb Kelleher and Southwest Airlines. The deregulation started after the Supreme Court case in 75 or 76.
Okay,
And deregulation
almost 10
really,
years before I'm talking about.
Right. Deregulation really kicked in with the Reagan administration in the early 80s.
Were there any chickens or livestock on your flight at all?
But it really was that. It was that vibe. If somebody had come on with a couple of chickens, it would in no way have been unusual. Literally, it was it was flying on a bus with wings. Today, you wouldn't find, you might find a direct Louisville-Richmond flight on some smaller airline. I mean, this stopped in every small town between Richmond and Louisville. It was amazing. And I remember the flight. And what I particularly remember was flying into Tri-City Airport in Tennessee, because, of course, that's up in the mountains. And the approach was that the pilot of this twin turboprop airplane stood it on its wing to make the approach for, or at least it seemed that way to somebody who was 7 or 8 years old. But I, because of that, believe it or not, I remember that flight as if it occurred yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
And I really one day want to do that kit in Piedmont markings.
Can you get them?
I'm sure somebody makes Piedmont markings for that.
Yeah, I flew that same airframe from Tri-Cities to Atlanta when I went to Europe.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
that was not a comfortable airplane.
It wasn't bad. It's better than what we flew back. Well, I've got one too.
Okay.
And it's the kit is out there-ish, sort of. Folks coming through the back catalog know my Volvo proclivities. And I've owned V70 XCs, which were the first cross-country Volvo wagons in the late 90s and up to 2000, 98, 99, 2000. And these cars were based on Volvo's P80 platform, which started about 90, I don't know, 4, 5, or 6 with the 850 wagons, which to me actually kits an 850 wagon.
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's almost there, but things like the front grille and the XC70s had a little bit taller wheelbase, and the roof rack was different and the grille was different. I would like to do one of those to match.
I wonder if somebody makes a resin conversion body for that kit.
Well, I've looked for STL files to make the conversion. There's just nothing out there. The Tamiya 850 wagon kit is kind of hard to find, and it's a curbside kit, which means there's not a lot to it, right?
Right.
$100.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't want it that bad. That'll buy a couple armor kits that I'd probably rather build. So
Gotcha.
interesting question.
It was.
Yeah.
So
thank you, Mr. Karnaka. We appreciate it.
well, and welcome back. Well, Dave, what's going on the direct message from Facebook?
Well, I've got several. Number one, you mentioned Christian Gurney. Well, Christian and Bill actually went down to the Roscoe Turner show, not to vend, but to participate. And Christian DM'd me to tell me that Bill took several models down there and won several awards. So
Not good for him.
Oh, congratulations.
Congratulations, Bill, of Bases by Bill. Bob Bayer, the voice of Bob. We talked last episode about dropping parts and finding parts and parts getting caught in your clothes and all. And Bob had an interesting suggestion, which is modeling in shorts, which is just one step removed from modeling in your underwear.
Which is just what? Never mind.
Yeah, we're not going to go there.
I'd have so much stuff super glued to my legs, it would not be funny.
That was my thought too. Either that, or I would drop an X-Acto and catch myself in the artery that runs down the inner thigh. That would be bad. Fellow club member and listener Lee Fogel,
Yeah.
sent Mike and I
Oh yeah,
a really, really, really nice gift. He sent us each a whiskey tumbler that was engraved as if it was a modeling fluid prescription. And they're really nice. They're really classy. He sent one to Mike and one to me. And I know Mike has already broken his in. He posted that on the dojo. And
I'm drinking out of it right now, in fact.
are you really? You'll have to
That's
take a
right.
picture of that and post that on the dojo.
Well, I'll need to fill it back up.
Lee, thank you. That was a very kind gesture. He appreciates the podcast, and that's why he did it. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate that level of support to let us know how much you enjoy it.
Well, it's interesting because the line on this glass for the dose is, if you assume no ice, is a three finger pour.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't want to do too many of those.
That's a full boat that's a full boat prescription.
Yeah, that'll cure what ails you.
Yes.
Except the headache.
One of the things I did miss by not going to Indy was seeing our Special Agent 001,
Michael Radke,
who had offered to pick up, he has in the past picked up from Patties of Jamaica, some Jamaican beef patties that Mike and I both just absolutely love. And he had offered again since he had heard I was coming up. And thank gosh I didn't tell him to get them, because it turns out I would be having to make a special trip up there to get them, because those things are good, man. And we gotta get back to Roscoe Turner. We got to do it.
We do. Unfortunately, it's really close to Heritage Con.
Yes, it is.
Well, this time wasn't terribly close. So
no, we could have done. Like I said, if it was not for a freak lot of really bad weather.
Well, I had other things to do today.
I know
but yes, the weather got you, and hopefully next year won't be that way.
Right. Finally, Ethan Eidenmill DM'd us about two matters. One, in regard to, we were talking about tweezers and all, and he was talking about the God Hand tweezers. Now, God Hand is a company out of Japan that makes really high-end tools, and I swear by their God Hand nippers or guillotine cutters, hand cutters, and frankly, it is my single favorite modeling tool and the one I would not do without. He has their tweezers, and as you would expect, their quality is just really, really great. So he recommends those if you need a really fine set of tweezers. He also said on a recent flight, he tried peanut butter whiskey.
Oh, no.
And he liked it. So peanut butter whiskey is apparently never going away. And we will constantly be hearing about it, which frankly is endlessly entertaining to me, because none of that was in any way, shape, or form planned. It was a happy accident, and I have heard about it ever since. Well, yeah, happy in that it stimulated a whole lot of listener reaction and feedback. The stuff itself was undrinkable, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, but I think Dave Morris has it right, though. We need to move on.
Yeah, right. All right. Well, that's all there is from the DMs.
Folks, we appreciate the email. A little light this month, so I hope you guys are busy. Maybe be less busy in the coming month. If you're less busy in the coming month, you can send us an email at plasticmodelmojo@gmail.com. That's the email side of things. Or you can direct message through Facebook. Or you can use the feedback web link in the show notes of this and every episode. So we got like 3 avenues of contact for listener mail now. And we really love this segment. It's a little light this month, unfortunately, but that's the way it goes sometimes, Dave.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll make up for it in the coming month or so.
Folks, when you're done listening to this episode, if you have not already done so, please go and rate the episode on whatever podcast app you're listening to. Also, please recommend us to your friends. The best way for us to continue to gain new listeners, and we are continuing to gain new listeners, is for you to tell a friend who doesn't listen to podcasts or doesn't listen to this podcast, recommend us, help them if they need help, to show them how to begin. And we continue to grow, and you all are the reason why.
Well, in addition to rating us through your podcast app, we have a new way to do that as well, not just an email link. We have a ratings web link. You can also find the show notes to this episode and every episode. You can use that link to leave a review and rate us 1 through 5 stars. We appreciate 5 stars. We appreciate a text review of the podcast, and all that helps us achieve the things that Dave just mentioned. Once you've rated the podcast, please check out the other podcasts out in the model sphere, and you can do so by going to www.modelpodcasts.com. It's Model Podcast, plural. It's a consortium website set up with the help of Stuart Clark from the Scale Model Podcast up in Canada. He's aggregated all the banner links to all the podcasts in the model sphere, so you got a one-stop shop there to go check out all the other great content in the model sphere. We've also got a lot of blog and YouTube friends. We got Model Airplane Maker, Mr. Chris Wallace, a great YouTube channel, a great blog, mostly 48 scale aircraft. You can go check that out.
Yeah, he just dropped a new video.
Evan McCallum, Panzermeister 36. If you want to know about weathering and building armor, that's going to be a good place for you to go. And the occasional HO scale railroad car as well.
Happy birthday, Evan.
That's Evan's birthday. Happy birthday, Evan. In addition to that, you can check out Sprue Pie with Fret, Stephen Lee, a great blog, long and short form content, 72nd scale centric, and a little model railroad stuff there as well. Steve's always got something good going on, so please check that out. And we got Dr. Paul Budzik, Scale Model Workshop. Always some good philosophy, always some good build content with what Paul's doing. You can find that at Patreon and on YouTube. So please check out Paul's Scale Model Workshop. And finally, Jeff, we're going to let you talk about the Enchilada blog and what's going on. What's up over there?
Well, I had a milestone a couple weeks ago. I got my 1 millionth blog visit. Took 6 years to get there. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but finally crossed the 1 million visits.
That's pretty good. So what have you recently been featuring?
Well, I had one this week that got a lot of attention. I was a little surprised. I did it as kind of a research post for somebody that asked a specific question, but I started researching the markings for the Japanese carrier aircraft that raided Pearl Harbor and how to decipher those.
Right.
And I thought that was a little more well known than it turned out it was. And I got a lot of really positive feedback and a lot of interest for that post.
What's nice is you're right, that information's out there, but to be honest with you, it's scattered around. And what you did was you very nicely summarized in a very short blog post everything you need to know to do any particular aircraft off any particular carrier, and at least what the, tail codes and such should be for it.
Yeah, the Japanese had a system that was pretty straightforward once you have it explained what it consisted of. But yep. they had markings that identified the carrier division that the aircraft was assigned to, the individual carrier, and it's one of those things that's right there in front of your face. Once you know what's going on, you can see it and you can look at that plane and say, yeah, that's from the Akagi or Zuakaku, or I'll get it out eventually. Any of those. And it generated a lot of interest. So that was what was on the blog this week that kind of resonated.
Well, that's great.
Where can folks find your blog again?
Inch High Guy at WordPress.
Yep. Just Google Inch High Guy and you will find it immediately.
Yeah.
And we'll link it.
Yes. Finally, if you are not a member of your national IPMS organization, please join. The national organizations do a lot for modelers in their countries, much of it invisible to the naked eye. And it's all volunteer modelers who are giving up part of their modeling time to try and make modeling better. Also, if you are a armor modeler or post-1900 figures modeler, AMPS, the Armor Modeling Preservation Society, is a great organization. Mike and I have been attending since almost the beginning, with some big gaps in there. We were able to attend last year at their national, and we've already got plans to attend the national this year. Highly recommend it, and great group of guys. So join the organization if you have any interest in that.
Plastic Model Mojo is brought to you by Model Paint Solutions, your source for Harder and Steenbeck airbrushes, David Union power tools, and laboratory-grade mixing, measuring, and storage tools for use with all your model paints, be they acrylic, enamels, or lacquers. Check them out at www.modelpaintsolutions.com.
Well, folks, it's Shop Talk time again, and it's nice to have you, Jeff, in the third chair.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, you're welcome. We got some topics here, and looking forward to this because I know, especially since you've just been to a show, we got some stuff to talk about that coming up. But lots of good stuff here, so we'll get rolling here in just a second. Well, the first topic I want to get in on, and I'm sure Dave does too.
Oh, yes.
Some recent stuff that went down. Modern weathering and scenery products and our experiences with those and kind of what we think of them at a high level, even a detailed level. I don't care. There's a lot of this stuff out there. Some of it's really good. Some of it is maybe not. And have we used it? Have we not used it? Let's just talk about it. So who are we starting with, Dave?
Well, let me start way back in the olden times when dinosaurs roamed the earth. And any groundwork was done with cellular clay and static grass. And that's basically all there was in the world.
And dirt from your yard.
And dirt from your yard, and maybe some roots repurposed as trees. And there was dioramas were not nearly as popular as they are now. Groundwork bases were not nearly as popular. And a big part of that probably had to do as to how difficult it was to pull off, because if you wanted to do groundwork, you really were doing a lot of it with stuff that was repurposed for making that groundwork. Now, as I've said, we live in the golden age of modeling, and that includes diorama products. There are all sorts of products to replicate any particular type of soil or groundwork or stones, or and instead of just static grass, there are these scenery products with pre-done tufts, with flowers, with all pre-made, so that you can generate a really, really nice groundwork scene with much, much less effort. Maybe a little more expense because you have to buy all these products. Now, I recently, with the Mooseroo, had some experience for the first time with a couple of them, with a couple of the AK groundwork products. And I will tell you, they are really, really good products. They work as advertised up to a point. It takes some experimentation, just like anything else in modeling does, but they do work as they're advertised to work, other than the drying times that they tell you on the products, at least in the experience with both the beach sand and the transparent water that I utilized. And then talking to John Bonani, he had a similar experience with their resin water product. The drying times are massively longer than what they say on the jars. They say 18 to 24 hours, and I put on thin layers of both the beach product and the transparent water. The transparent water took a full 6 or 7 days to dry completely.
Wow.
Now, when it did, it dried completely clear, just as advertised. It works just as advertised. You can build it up in layers. You can make waves. There's all sorts of things you can do with it, but do not believe that you're going to be able to do it as quickly as the product says. I think that's probably true for a lot of these things, is they tell you on the instructions what they believe, but you've got to experiment and see what actually works. And these groundwork products are going to make you get better quicker, but it's not going to make you night shift overnight. You still have to spend the time.
Jeff, you use any of this stuff, either weathering or any of these effects?
I do some weathering stuff. I don't get into the specific products as much. It's like the old saw about the paint. Everybody's got a paint line. It seems like everybody's got mud and everybody's got rust and everybody's got a jar of stuff they swept up off their garage floor. I don't know where they're getting this stuff, but everybody will sell you jar after jar of this stuff. I don't use a lot of it. I mean, Dave was going back into the prehistoric times, and I'll go back to the Paleolithic. When I was in middle school, my school library got the old Model Railroader magazine.
Yeah.
And I'm sure everybody, Mike, you probably still have them all. But I went to the school library and I'd read those things cover to cover. And one of the staples in there was the Woodland Scenics product line, which is still out there and still available. And you can get their layout box, which has enough different foams and foliage and grass products and earth products and stuff to do. I think it's a 4x8 sheet of plywood for a layout. And I've got one of those boxes and I will never run out of that stuff. So if I want a tree, I'll do the trick of strands of wires and make my tree and beef it up a little bit and put the leaf foam on that and the grass. And that is perfectly convincing in 70-second scale for just about any scene you want to do as far as groundwork for armor or base for an aircraft or that kind of thing. Outside of that, I weather with some very basic products. I use oils. I use the Tamiya panel line colors. I've got some of those. I've got some AK mud effects for dirtying up tracks and that sort of thing. And I have some cheap dollar store mascara pens and eyeliners and stuff. And that is really great for making rust streaks or oil streaks or that kind of thing. And if you're doing it over a gloss base and you mess up, you get some mineral spirit and you can thin it out and you can draw the streak out, or you can erase it entirely with any of those products. So they're very forgiving. And you can perfect your techniques a little bit with that kind of thing. You can also use it to shade panels. I've seen no need to get another paint drawer full of once a month use kind of material.
Now, with those Tamiya panel liners, do you use them straight from the bottle or do you dilute them at all?
I shake them up good and then I let them sit a little bit so they're kind of self-diluting. And then when you get down to where the brush just hardly won't reach anymore, you've got a very thick mixture. And
Right.
You can thin it at that point. You have to make sure that you're not using a very aggressive thinner on that or you'll just wipe your paint back off again. But
Exactly.
yeah, it's something to watch. I've made that mistake more than once.
We all go through negative modeling. If you don't go through negative modeling, you're not modeling enough.
Yeah. And learning how to correct your negative modeling.
Yes.
The guys that throw their model away when they screw it up never get to the decal stage. So they never get to learn the joys of decaling. But you've, in my philosophy is you've almost got to finish a model once you've started it with very rare exceptions, or use it as a learning experience if nothing else.
Right. I agree.
What about you, Mike?
I've not used a lot of the scenery products, but I got into the MIG ammo. I think they're the splatter effects.
Yeah.
Which are essentially really heavily pigmented enamel paints. And I really like using them. And I think they're, like you said, you got an undercoat gloss or satin of some kind, and you're using these enamel products and mineral spirits on top of that. So they're very forgiving. Where these things drive me nuts, and it's part of it's the product, and admittedly part of it is the rate at which I complete models.
I know where you're going.
These things just dry up in those little plastic jars faster than anything I've ever experienced.
Yep.
I've got 40-year-old Pactra and 40-year-old Humbrol paint in my collection of materials that is as good as the day it was made. And they're metal tins, or they're little glass bottles or plastic bottles with good lids on them, hard plastic bottles. But these things in their polyethylene or polypropylene bottles with their little snap ring caps on them and stuff, once you open those things, you got maybe 6 months
Right.
on some of those before it's just this rock hard. And maybe you can reconstitute it with mineral spirits. I don't know. I think probably at some point you could do that, but once you go down that road, it's never going to be the same as it was designed. The way it came out of the bottle, right? It's going to be something thinner or thicker than that, depending on how much you dilute it. That's kind of been my peeve with some of those things, is that their shelf life is just non-existent.
Right. And I've heard some of the same thing regarding some of the scenery products, some of the, different types of mud or whatever from the different manufacturers. And I'm not singling anyone out, that once you open them, that they don't stay in the same state for very long. So it's either a use it or lose it proposition.
Now, some of that stuff, I'm sure you could open up and, spritz some water in there or whatever and humidify it. And
right.
But, who wants to manage their
their stock,
their paint and finish stock? I mean, really,
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard enough to manage your kit collection and your current projects.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a route most folks want to take. And admittedly, again, it's, some of the problem is my pace. So realizing that, I would recommend not buying that stuff on a whim.
Right.
That you might use it.
Right. Buy it only when you have a project and you are at the phase where you need that product.
Yeah, or very near the finished phase where you're going to use it. So,
yeah,
I'm working on this KV85. We'll get into it a little bit later, but I don't know that any of the stuff I've got for these MIG Splashes products are going to be any good to use. If I want to use that kind of stuff, I'm going to have to go buy them again, which is a little disappointing, but I could always build faster.
Yes, that's you. Yeah, you can talk to Jeff about that after the show. He can explain to you how that works.
Well, it is frustrating though, and if you do anything to alter that at all, you risk opening, a pencil eraser the next time. It's going to be one gelled mass down there and totally unusable.
Yeah, well, that's true as well. That's it's why I never pour thin paint back into the bottle.
Yeah. No,
you just don't know what's gonna. Well, I know what's gonna happen. It's not gonna be good.
The one exception I have found to that, Mike, is if you're using Mr. Color and you use nothing but Mr. Color thinner.
Yes.
Yeah.
That stuff seems to last in its thin state for 6-8 months.
That's the only brand of paint, the only paint line I've ever personally used, and admittedly I haven't used them all, but that's the only one that I get to see the bottom of that bottle clear at the end of that bottle. I've used every drop out of that I can get out of it, and I think the trick is the unicorn tears. You just always thin with that, and if you have mixed just that and nothing else in there, you can put it back in that bottle and it doesn't affect it in any negative way at all.
It just, once thinned, it stays thinned without having any negative effects, as opposed to enamel paint. Once you thin, it either turns it into jelly or you get a separation with a rock hard bottom. So no, I completely endorse that.
In the old Testors Model Master line, I don't know what it was, but they do something in their blue pigment specifically. If you open that bottle and got any on the lip where the threads are and tighten it back down again, you need channel locks to open that thing again if you can open that bottle ever again.
Yeah.
It is super glue for some reason. It glues that sucker shut.
Yeah. I cracked a couple of bottles trying to open them with channel locks.
Yes.
So for me, my bench, I'm not like deeply invested in any of this stuff. I'd be curious what our listeners have done and what your experiences are. Honestly, I'm a little reluctant to get deeply invested. I think the better approach is to get it when you know you're going to use it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
unless you have a planned experiment that you're going to use it before then, which I've done.
Mm-hmm.
I did that quite a bit with one of my, what's that little Airfix Bofors and Morris truck we keep talking about that won't go away. I spent a lot of time developing the scenery formulation for that little base I put it on, but I'm not so sure that was bought product anyway. I think I came up with all that on my own.
Well, and that is one thing I would urge you. Again, don't buy the product till right before you need it, because you never know how quickly it's going to go bad. But additionally, before you actually use it, if this is the first time you have used that product, experiment. I mean, I'll go back to what Steve tells us all the time. He spends 50% of his time experimenting before doing something to make sure that he knows how to do it when he does it for the actual modeling application. So I would urge you, if you're going to use one of these products you've never used before, experiment with it when you get it.
Well, at risk of a tangent here, Jeff, do you experiment much? You build a lot.
I have some test panels from some old kits that are misshapen, let's put it that way, that were never quite right. And I will test my paints and that sort of thing on it. My build rate is such that I kind of am in the groove, because I've just airbrushed last month to do the last group and that sort of thing. The one time where I really felt it is when I did the Akitsushima, the seaplane tender that I did.
Yes.
Yeah.
I really got out of practice because that build drug out so long. It was kind of novel to airbrush again. And I did have to learn how to tune up the airbrush and tune up the paint mixture and tune up the pressures and all that. So yeah, if I see the skills waning in anything, I always have a test panel before I do an airbrush session to dial in that particular color, the temperature of the house that day, the paint mixture, all the things that the guys that have formulas will tell you to do. I find it so subjective. I have to do it each time to dial that airbrush in. So
Yep.
I test in that situation. If I'm doing a new scenery product in particular, I will do a small 1x1 panel or something like that. But most of this stuff, I pretty much know how it's going to behave. I use the Mr. Color paint. I know how they're going to react to things. I use Mr. Surfacer primer. I know how that's going to react. So that stuff's all in my relatively recent experience, and I don't have to experiment. Now, I do want to do some water effects. I've got a couple things coming up, that projects in the back of my mind that I really want to get good at, and that I will probably do half a dozen different variations. I've got a transparent color that I want to put on some A5M Claudes. They had this clear golden varnish on the Dash 4s in that series.
Yep.
And I have got, I think, 3 different products that I bought this week to test on test panels to see which one gives me that golden sheen that I'm looking for. So if it's something I've never done before, no experience, yeah, I'll test that. If it's something that's very subjective, like getting your airbrush mixture just right for that little Luftwaffe squiggle or whatever, absolutely, I will be hitting a test panel on that before I even get near my subject. But for the most part, I'm in a pattern with products I'm used to using, and I may not test everything every time.
Well, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much in line with this philosophy.
Lesson is build faster.
Well, there's no substitute for practice. Practice.
That is absolutely true.
Well, this one ought to be timely, and we've talked about this offline. At least Dave and I have, and I think you and Dave have. Kind of the current state of model shows, particularly in the United States, because that's the ones we're familiar with, and I think mostly our experiences in our region. Dave and I are going to some of the bigger shows with the podcast, but I'm not sure where we want to take this one other than Dave, I'll let you start off with this one.
This whole subject came about when Inch and I were at the show in Columbus. and we were standing in the lobby of the show at about, right after 1:00. We had hit the vendor rooms, we had hit the model rooms, we'd had some really nice conversations with a couple of modelers in the model rooms prior to them closing it for judging. And we went to lunch, we came back, and it was just a little after 1, and the vendors were already starting to pack up. And Inch and I have both noticed that at a lot of shows now, you're seeing vendors who'll get there right as the show opens at 9, but they're not going to hang around till 3 or 4 when the judging finishes and awards come. And it almost seems like they are leaving earlier and earlier.
Yeah.
And in addition, we were talking about these shows that have the model room closed for judging as opposed to open while judging's occurring, and the different effects that it has. And then we also were discussing having display only tables and people having access to their models throughout the show. So if you were doing display only and wanted to leave early, 2:00 or whatever, that you could go in, get your stuff, have access to it, and that might encourage more participation. So Inch and I had just a really great conversation at Columbus, just 15 or 20 minutes on this subject. And then Mike and I have been talking about the fact that over the last year, we have seen more and more shows go into an open judging system with gold, silver, and bronze, with no categories really, and no limits on the awards that are given, and the pluses and minuses of that as well. So basically wanted to open it up to a discussion of all of those topics. Let's start with vendors. Now, it's interesting that you noted, Jeff, that at Indianapolis, you didn't see quite as many vendors leaving quite as early.
Yeah, and that was noteworthy because it was an exception. You generally do see that. And at
Right.
this show, maybe it was the rain. I don't know.
That's
For whatever
I was
reason.
wondering if it was the rain.
Yeah, and it may have been that there were, like I said, there were 3 guys there with estates, and they had 4 or 5 tables each, and they were full of models. And those guys probably didn't want to take that stuff home. So
Right.
they're trying to move as much of that as they can. But I would say probably at the indie show, at least 80% of the vendors hung in there till the end of judging.
Yeah.
And that's an exception anymore.
That really is, because at Columbus, they were streaming out by 1:15, 1:20. And a related thing is, a number of years ago, we had the individual or company that was coming in and buying all of the kits on some vendors' tables early.
Yes, they would clean the vendor's room out for you before
Right.
10 o'clock.
And luckily, because that particular person stopped doing that for whatever reason, and nobody else seems to have taken that up, that problem seems to have gone away.
Ever the attorney.
I'm not going to say things that will get us in trouble.
If you read the vendor's, I don't know, the vendor's statement from the indie show, it said that they will enforce not selling your tables before noon. And
Yeah.
if you did sell your tables, you would not be welcome back to any more of their shows as a vendor.
Yeah. And that's about the only sanction because a show can't prevent a willing buyer and a willing seller from making that transaction whenever they want. So yeah, that is really all they can do, is say, if you do that, you're not going to be welcome back. We're not going to sell you tables in the future.
Now, do they have the same situation for folks who just didn't sell out but just pack up and leave when they feel like it?
Not to my knowledge.
No, you're free to pack up and leave whenever you want. Now, obviously, that kind of makes the guys who put on the show unhappy if their vendors are leaving early.
It should.
Right.
especially during the judging time.
Especially if you have closed
Exactly.
judging.
We'll get that in a minute. But
Yeah.
you know, in my military collecting hobby, I haven't in the last couple of years, but I've been a frequent attender or almost perennial attender to the Ohio Valley Military Society Show of Shows. It's in Louisville, Kentucky. It's a huge military show. The vendor tables, it's north of 1,000. It's a big show, right?
Yes.
And the vendor tables sell out every year, and there's a waiting list. And their method of enforcement is if you pack up and leave before 3 p.m. on Saturday. Now the show is vendor setup on Wednesday, and there's some haggling, buying and trading with the OVMS membership, life members, et cetera, on Wednesday, a little bit, not much. And then Thursday morning is the show, but the general public doesn't get in until, I want to say, Friday morning. I don't know if that's right or not. And then there's Saturday, and then there's Sunday.
Right.
Sunday's kind of the last vestiges of folks who have a lot of tables who want to take their time to pack out and get out of there on their own schedule. But the tables sell out. If you pack up and leave before 3 p.m. on Saturday, because they've advertised this show nationwide that it's going to be open during these hours, right? Now, this is a lot bigger thing than the IPMS Invitational, but I think some of this could still be put into play. What I'm getting at is if you don't honor that agreement, the tables sell out every year. There's a waiting list every year. You lose your automatic renewal privilege for the next year if you leave before 3 o'clock. So you go the back of the line.
Wow.
And you may or may not get a table.
Yeah.
Because they don't want the negative impact on the society of folks coming in who are not necessarily members or members can only come for one day, coming in there on Saturday morning and 25, 30, 40, 50% of the tables have already packed up and left.
Right.
It's not a good look. So I understand what Roscoe Turner is doing there. I just wonder how it spills over into folks just packing up and leaving when they want.
Yeah.
Well, we've seen something similar. I've seen this at several shows where you will get a member of the public, usually a mother, and she has 3 small boys in tow.
Yep.
And she shows up to the show after lunch at 1 o'clock. Now, we all have in our flyers and everything said that the show is from 9 to 4, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's the typical hours. If you look at any of these flyers, they'll say 9 to 4 or 9 to 3 or something like that. The mother with the kids that shows up at 1 o'clock, what has she got? She sees the vendors packing up and a closed model floor.
Yeah.
Where's the show?
Which brings us to the next part of this, is the closed model floor.
Yep.
I understand why it's done. People talk about how people never change their minds, that once you have a belief, it's always a belief. I'm coming to change my mind on a number of things. Well, I'm not going to go full Jim Bates and say that we ought to eliminate contests and just do display-only shows. I do think emphasizing display over competition would probably be a good thing. I don't want to eliminate the competition. People like it. People enjoy doing it. But I think there is growing room for people who want to simply display only. And that's a good thing. I understand why closed judging rooms are done, because it's really tough to judge in big crowds of people. Not least, just the crowds themselves are a problem, but then you have the problem of the guy who wants to hover around while you judge his model.
Yeah.
And then wants to take issue with whatever criticism was made of it. And so I understand why closed judging has been done, but I do think it has to die. I really think that to combat both vendors leaving early and the problem Inch talks about people coming later and then not really having access to the show, I think that the judges are going to have to simply sack up and understand we're going to judge with people around us, and we're just simply going to have to deal with it / ignore it. We went to Heritage Con. Heritage Con not only were the tables not sealed off during judging, the crowds were enormous. Enormous to the point where it was hard to get down the aisles at times until later in the afternoon. But they managed to get their judging done with the crowds there, and they seem to have no problem doing it. So I am more...
We had at least a handful of friends who were judging.
Yes.
Who offered no complaints about the crowd encroaching on what they're trying to do.
Exactly.
So the existence theorem is there that will work. And if somebody says it's not, it's just not true.
Right. Well, and like I said, I understand why it was done, because you have the occasional pain in the butt person who hovers while you judge their stuff.
Now, at Heritage Con, it worked in Canada, and Canadians are well known to be at least 20% less pains in the butts than Americans. So that may have been
but there are a fair number of Americans at Heritage Con. So
the handful of friends were almost universally Americans.
Okay.
That's true.
Okay. So maybe my thesis is void.
I don't know if it's void, but it's subject to challenge.
There you go.
And like I said, I think that we can't make life miserable for everybody to deal with the people who are being pains in the butt. The occasional hoverer, the occasional guy who wants to fight the judges because he didn't get his little piece of plastic, or plaque or whatever. It's not worth making everybody else's experience worse to deal with that person.
The first lesson of going to a model contest is the contest judging is subjective.
Exactly. Well, and that's a whole nother thing that people don't want to deal with.
I have personally taken models to shows that have not placed in the category, and the next show have gotten one of the higher awards for the show with that same model, doing nothing to it in the interim. It's just the competition was better at the first one, or the judge saw a flaw at the first one that the guys at the second didn't. And you got to take the highs with the lows.
Exactly. And I think also that to segue into what Mike and I have been talking about with the judging systems.
Well, hang on. I wanted to make one more point.
Go ahead.
Maybe you remember, but it was pre-Plastic Model Mojo, but it was at a Cincinnati show we were both at that somebody was trying to influence the judges from outside the closed barrier of the model room.
Yes.
So it doesn't necessarily work that way.
Yes, absolutely true.
If you got that guy at your show,
he's going to be a pain in the ass no matter what.
Even closing the model area is not going to isolate you from
true
the
enough.
duress of folks who want to make sure he painted the dials on his Focke-Wulf 190 or whatever.
Yeah,
whatever.
Exactly.
Brother.
But I do want to segue into the judging system issue, 1, 2, 3 versus an open system, because I do think that an open system lends itself a little more to judging with the model room being open, because of the fact that judging can begin as soon as models hit the table.
Yeah.
That judging teams can be out there as models are being placed out earlier. And it has a dual effect. One, a lot of judging can take place before the crowds get there, so you don't have quite the concern about hoverers. But also, because a lot of stuff gets judged before the end of entry, you can actually hold entry open later, which may give more people an incentive to come to your show if they think that they can make it and get their model entered before registration closes. And in addition, it helps on the other end in that your judging is done quicker because you've already judged 90% of the stuff on the table, or 75% or whatever percentage, pick your number. You've judged that percentage of the stuff on the table before registration closed. So instead of promising awards at 3:30 and not starting them till 4 and not getting them done till 4:30, you can wrap up judging by 2:30, actually get the awards started at 3, and people can be out the door by 3:30. And, again, if you make your show more accessible by holding registration open earlier and finishing judging and awards earlier, that expands the circle of miles that people can travel to your show and still get the maximum level of enjoyment out of it.
I'd agree with that.
So, and I'll be honest with you, I have no particular preference of 1, 2, 3 over open, as far as I don't really care what judging system is used. I mean, they're all subjective, and they each have their pluses and minuses. But, I do think Mike and I are seeing, I think Mike would agree, a general trend toward open system shows.
I don't know what it is. I don't know if there were more of these shows that existed that we've been just lucking into when we do the model show spotlights.
That's possible. Although
it is possible. I don't know that I believe it. Or more folks converting this. We've been doing the podcast now. We're in our 5th season. So
right,
a lot of this could have come about in the time we've been doing the podcast.
I'm trying to think if anybody in Region 4 does an open system.
Well, I know Pittsburgh does. They have forever.
Okay.
Louisville used to, but does not anymore.
Well, that's an interesting thing to explore.
What do you think, Jeff? Do you have a preference?
I've never been judged or participated in an open system venue. That's why I'm trying to rack my brain if I've ever actually seen it in practice. I think that the judges, the people in charge of judging, should probably have final say. If there is such a prevalence of people interfering in whatever way, then I think they need to be shielded from that while they're trying to look at the models. Definitely. The downside, of course, is you are basically, in one sense, ending the display half of the show at noon, because you never get that back. Once they announce awards, everybody floods the room and the models go back in the cases and the parking lot empties.
Yeah.
Likewise, at noon, the vendors area, fortunately at Roscoe Turner, it didn't, but often it starts shutting down right around lunch sometime as well. And I was wondering if there might be room, and Dave kind of hit on this. The European shows have a whole other hall full of special interest groups. They're either modelers with shared interests that converge on the show, and they're all interested in Japanese aviation. So you get guys from 4 different clubs that show up, and they all have one big long table, and they bring all their Japanese subjects or whatever. Or, Stugs, and now you have a table full of Stugs, and there's 3 guys back there talking Stugs all day. And, that's the Evan McCallum table, and everybody hangs out there. But if there's anything at all that could, because let's face it, after 1 o'clock, maybe 2, even if the vendors are there, you've been through the vendors room 3 or 4 times. The model room's still closed. You're kind of hanging out, and there's a lot of people staring at their phone or talking amongst themselves or whatever. I went to the show with Michael Smith, a good friend of mine from Muncie. He's the curator for the Academy of Model Aeronautics Museum, which is an RC aircraft mainly of organization. And he asked me, he said, who would I talk to get some tables for a informational display about RC modeling? And I thought, there's something to take up some of that time and give some interesting content for people while they're waiting for the judging to be over and while the vendors are packing up and all that. So there's a whole other opportunity of special interest groups or somebody, giving seminars or putting on displays of some kind. I don't know. You'd need more room for that. So there's a problem there.
And that is another thing that has gone away from back in the 80s and 90s. When you attended a model show, there was almost always, at an invitational, clearly at a regional, which back then was a 2-day affair. But even at many invitationals, there was one or more seminars that were put on different subjects, everything from painting figures or armor weathering techniques or whatever, the anatomy of the tiger tank or whatever it happened to be. Now, keep in mind, I think a lot of that disappeared because of YouTube. That it used to be the only modeling tips you could get were from in pre-internet days were for members of your own club, what you read in magazines, and then when you went to a modeling show in another city, sitting in on the presentation that was given almost no matter what it was, even if it wasn't particularly the thing that was of interest to you, because those were the only channels to learn new stuff. Where now you could go on YouTube and start watching modeling videos and never stop for the rest of your life.
Yeah. How do we know that, Dave?
Yeah, I'm guilty of that. And believe me, you're not the only person to point that out. But I do think that doesn't mean that having a presentation at a show, having some sort of live presentation, isn't still a valuable thing to do. Because the one thing that you don't get with the internet and YouTube is interaction.
Yeah.
So if somebody's putting a presentation on and they say, well, I do this way, you have the opportunity to say, why? Or have you tried this? Or does this work better than doing that? You have the interactiveness, which isn't available from just a pure YouTube presentation. Now, there are some live streams that actually do that, even in modeling. But I don't think that I think we've given up the presentation at the model show too easily, and I would like to see it come back.
Well, I want to go back and talk about the display only a little bit.
Okay.
I think it's great. And Dave, you mentioned Jim's show and his philosophy on that, which is, it's all cool, whether we agree with it entirely or not. This is Mike's opinion. This tiger meat thing they've started at Madison, that's going to carry on now.
Right.
And well, it's going to be at Hampton, and it's going to be, hopefully we'll keep carrying on Fort Wayne and whatever's next after that. Honestly, it's good. I don't debate that, but the consternation around having to provide essentially a second venue, right?
Right.
To do this is unnecessary.
Yes, completely agree.
If a contestant wanted to say this is for display only, not to be judged, all you need is a different colored piece of paper under that model on the regular contest table.
Right.
That the judges would simply just pass it by.
Right. Instead of an entry form, which is white with all of the writing on it, you just have a green piece of paper with no writing on it or anything that sits under that model. And the judges know.
Display only.
Yeah, display only.
It doesn't have to say anything.
Yeah.
And, admittedly, that works until they're inundated with display onlys.
Right.
And then you have a different problem. But in the current flavor of things, I think that works.
I completely agree.
And you don't need this, because the beef that a lot of folks have with this is that they're relegated to this obscure corner of the show space that nobody's going to. Maybe the lighting's not as good, or it's not getting the traffic.
Yeah.
And those are legitimate beefs.
Yep. No, I completely agree. And I haven't been to a national yet where the tables were so utterly full that you couldn't have had display models on there because you were completely out of room. Now, they came a little close in San Marcos, but even then, there was space on the tables for display-only models. If
Madison could have easily absorbed what was in the breakout area for tiger meat in the main contest room.
Exactly. And I think it would have been better I mean, not that they didn't have a beautiful, frankly, the area where the display models only were, which looked out onto the lake, was just, it was
And had all-
tons more,
yeah.
tons more attractive. And
Well, it
tons
had a lot more natural light, but
exactly.
but were folks going through there at the same rate they're going through the model room?
Probably not.
I think that's the differentiator there, and
Right.
I think what I suggest is one possible solution to fix that, and not have to, oh God, we have to have this other area with all these extra tables for this. No, you
Right.
don't. No, you don't. You just
Yep.
you put them
Just
with
put them
everything
on
else,
the table.
and you have an indicator as to what they are.
Yep.
Now, anything that brings more models enhances the show.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I would love to see you guys do a great job at Louisville. You allow sweeps, which I know some people just hate the idea of one
Right.
guy killing a category, but that encourages everybody to bring multiples in that category.
Yeah.
And you get more models on the table.
Yeah.
And, Roscoe Turner had a flat fee. It was $10 to get in, as many models as you wanted to bring. And like I said, the guy ahead of me brought 18. So you got to see 18 models from just that one guy. And you want as much of that as you can. You want your model count to be up, in my opinion. You want to go to a show with 900 models on the table.
Yep. Well, and by the way, taking that back to an open system, if you go to an open system as opposed to a 1, 2, 3, you don't have to worry about sweeps versus no sweeps.
Right.
Because
there you go.
each model's being judged on its own. And if Steve Hustad's supermodeler shows up with models in the category that you normally enter, you don't have to worry about whether we're having sweeps or no sweeps.
Well, if Steve Hustad shows up, that solves your display only problem right there, because everybody else is display only at that point.
Yeah. Well, but no, I do think that is something to consider. I would encourage everybody who's putting on a model show. There tends to be a situation where once you start running a successful model show and doing it year after year, you don't ever think about changing it because it's working. And the attitude becomes, it's working, why mess with it?
Yeah.
I would encourage every club out there who is in that situation, when you come to do your next model show, put everything on the table, okay? Ask yourself, how are we going to handle vendors? Ask yourself, are we going to close off the model room during judging? Ask yourself, do we want to go to an open system versus 1, 2, 3? Ask all of those questions, keeping in mind you want to make the model show as pleasant and fulfilling an experience for your customers as possible. And so any change you can make to make their experience better is something you should consider.
And I would include in that not only customers as the modelers, us guys that always go to the shows, but like I said earlier, the mother that's bringing 4 potential new modelers to see the model show for the first time and shows up at 1:00.
Yep.
And what is her experience and what is the experience of those 4 kids?
Yep.
A closed model room and vendors pushing carts out.
Yep. Anything you can do to avoid that.
Yeah. And we have all said that the model show is there till 4.
Well, we're going to get some feedback on that topic for sure.
Oh, yes. Well, good. That's what we want. Healthy discussion.
Discussion is good.
That's right. Well, our third topic tonight comes from Steve Anderson's A Guided Journal for Modelers. And it's our thoughts on bases. And it's pretty open-ended. So we can talk about anything about bases that we want to talk about. So, Dave, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, well, let me give you the one golden rule. If it's not a really well done base, don't put it on a base. Okay. A crappy base distracts from a model. And I know numerous examples that I could cite of really, really nicely done models where the modeler mounted it on a piece of foam core, some last minute half whatever.
Ass.
I didn't want to say it. Display, and it actually detracts from the model. If you're not going to do a really well done base, don't put a base down at all. Put the model on the table. Now, if you're going to put a model on a base, make sure it's a well done base. And you got two choices. You've got a terrain style base where, the aircraft is sitting on a runway or a dirt revetment or whatever. Or you have the display base that is not attempting to replicate any natural terrain features, but is simply a well done, well polished, evenly finished, complementary colored display base, so that the model sitting on it is enhanced by the completedness of the base, just raising it up, making it easier to handle if the model is attached to the base. So those are Dave's two laws. Yeah. Jeff, you don't put most of your models on a base?
I by the time I'm done with whatever batch I'm working on, I've got the next batch is knocking at the door. I kind of want to get on to the next one a lot of times. I do like bases. I like the looks of them. I like the ability to put a figure on the base to give the whole model scale. What I see it shows that I think is the biggest problem with bases is you have a tendency for people to put whatever subject they're putting there, and then they want to fill every square inch of the rest of that base with something. A discarded helmet, a discarded weapon, a motorcycle, another vehicle. And
Right.
You get these unrealistic prime targets for your artillery support or whatever to take out 8 tanks at once because they're parked next to each other, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Particularly, you have that in where somebody is doing a diorama, so they're doing a base with a purpose, and what many modelers tend to do is they want to just keep piling more and more stuff on that base. More and more visual interest. Well, let's put a helmet here, let's put a bucket there, and at some point you reach not only diminishing returns, but you actually ease over into every additional added item detracts from the model, which is supposed to be the main subject of the diorama.
Yeah. Well, the scene should be, I think, a lot of times inspired by a picture, or at least typical of the pictures that you're seeing. If
Yes.
you have a model of a Corsair with the palm trees in the background, you might see a Jeep with the guns in the Jeep getting ready to be put back in, or you may see a mechanic working on something on top of a barrel, but you don't see 3 Corsairs stacked next to each other and a tow truck and a tank and scattered weapons laying around in the dirt and that sort of thing. But you can see that at a show.
Not to name check Mr. Hustad again, which we're going to have to start paying him royalties if we continue to reference him. He works from photographs. And I think one of the reasons he does that is specifically to avoid the problem you're talking about, because he's working from reproducing a specific photograph. He knows naturally he's not going to have that problem. Now, I don't think you have to always work from a photograph, but you ought to at least familiarize yourself with a lot of photographs of your particular main subject to understand what the environment around them looks like.
Yeah, and what you're modeling
Sure.
should be typical of what you're seeing in the average photograph, in my mind.
Right. Yeah.
Not the
agree.
outlier. Not the outlier.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
Dave, we talk bases amongst our chat group with our Canadian modeler friends, and
Yes.
and we've had this conversation a lot.
Endlessly on car rides. For some reason, when we're traveling to a show, this one always comes up.
So I'll get the big one out of the way, the easy one out of the way first. It's the elephant on a postage stamp.
Yes.
You don't see this much with aircraft as you do with armor.
Right.
With an armor subject, if you have running gear hanging off the edges of the base, your base is too small.
Yeah. Well, now keep in mind, what was it? Shep Payne always emphasized people not making the base so much larger than the subject.
Right.
And I think people took that advice and ran with it, maybe a little too far.
I mean, if the track run up to the drive sprocket or the idler is hanging off the base and the fenders are hanging off a little, or the gun barrels hanging off the edge, that's usually okay. But
right. That's the edge of where you ought to be.
But when you've got the first road wheel stations or the last road wheel station hanging into space,
yeah,
this is my opinion. It does not look good. You got an elephant on a thimble.
Right.
That's the best analogy I can think of. An elephant in a little ballerina tutu standing on one toe on a thimble. It's like Dumbo, right?
Right.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Now, and I do think Shep Payne was right. You don't want to go to the other extreme,
right?
Where you see these people have a model that's maybe 8 inches by 8 inches, and they put it on a base that's 16 inches by 16 inches. So you've got the model in the middle or somewhere around there, but a whole lot of empty space. That's the opposite problem that creates the exact same problem.
And I will grant that I think aircraft models are at a disadvantage here, because to get the entire airplane on the base,
yeah,
you're already too big.
Yeah.
Well, you should look at the footprint of the wheels. The wheel footprint should fit neatly on the base, and the base should act as a frame.
Yeah, that's where I was going. That should establish, if it's not a diorama, if it's just a scenic base, that's kind of where you want to be.
Yeah.
If it's wingtip to wingtip and spinner to tail, and it's all on the base, man, that's a lot of base.
I see nothing wrong with the wings overhanging the edge of the base, as long as all the wheels are there, and put your chocks on and put your pilot standing in front of it, and it's a nice looking display almost every time.
Right. And keep in mind the subject. If you've got a 72nd scale single engine fighter, you can do a base that's wingtip to wingtip and nose to tail, or not exactly nose to tail, but firewall to tail, and it'll look perfectly fine. If you've got a 4-engine bomber or a 32nd scale jet fighter, if you do a base that encompasses the entire physicality of the aircraft, it's just going to get too honking big too quick.
Yeah, the base can detract from the whole display.
Yes, that's my point. You mentioned that you don't do many bases because by the time you get done with the model, you're on to the next one and you're already tired of it. Yeah. I think that is the major contributor to bad bases out there.
Oh, I think you're right.
Yeah. People finish the model and they are tired of it, but they feel like they've got to do a base, and so they don't put the effort that's needed to make it a good base and just make it slap something together. And to me, this is an argument for non-terrain bases for a lot of aircraft models. You can have a if you build 72nd scale aircraft, you can have 72nd scale single engine aircraft. You can have a standard base. This is the Jeff Groves standard base. And you can have 4 or 5 of those. And then whenever you go to any show, you can put whatever model you've recently finished on that base. And that base is already a nice display style. It's not terrain style, but a display style base that presents your model well. Then when you're done at that contest, you put the models away, you put the bases away, and you'll reuse those bases for the next time with whatever new you finish.
Well, and I will submit that what you and Mike were discussing at the beginning of this episode with the bases by Bill and their trim thing, they have done that for you. I've got two of the Japanese carrier bases sitting on my desk as we speak. They're the 6-inch footprint, and they happen to be Japanese bases. Any Japanese carrier aircraft can fit on that base and look perfectly at home right out of the box.
And you are exactly correct. That's one of the reasons I think that what they're doing with that inset now is fantastic. It will allow you with almost no effort to have a polished presentation that will make your model look better and more visually interesting. But the one thing that it really does is it doesn't detract from the model. And that's the worst sin that you can commit.
You put one flight crew member standing in front of it with his hand on the prop, and it's polished. It's done.
Yeah. And I'm like you. I like having a single figure for scale.
If I could only paint figures better.
Yeah, you and me both. You and me both.
On this same vein, one thing that's been I don't know if I call it a peeve or not, but it's just something I wish I would see less of. There's some folks out there who build some amazing models, and they build a lot of models. So typically the model itself is not based. So at home, they have a display or shelves or whatever full of a lot of singular models that are not on a base. But when they go to the show, they have a base they put the model on.
That's a crappy base.
And that model base is not to the same caliber that the model's been built to.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
And kudos to the judging teams who can look past that. I could not.
Yeah, honestly, they're supposed to. Technically, they're supposed to. They're not supposed to judge the base.
If you got a base that's got unpainted static grass on it, and that's your airfield base for your entry, you could do better.
Yes.
Your model is way better than that. I would invest some time into 2 or 3 really well done scenic bases that have some bare patches, some bare earth, or some wheel chocks or something.
Yeah.
That you can put any model on and have it look as good as the model you've put on it.
Right.
Would just go a whole lot further to furthering your entire presentation at a show.
Right. You've put so much effort into the model. Why hurt the visual appearance? Want to make it attractive to the eye.
It looks better.
Right. That's the whole point of it.
You got this base you've put 35, 40, maybe an hour into.
Right.
And this plane you've got 108 hours in. I mean, it's not that big a stretch to put consummate time into the base. It's just not.
Right. And you don't have to do that every time. Again, if you have a standard base, either a presentation style or a terrain style, you only have to have a few of those.
Right. Exactly.
So you don't have to, for every model you finish, unlike Jeff Groves finishes a batch build of 8 models, he doesn't have to do 8 new bases.
Unless he takes them all to the same show.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, you're going to allow sweeps. I'm going to need at least 3 for each category, right?
There you go.
To have a shot at the sweep.
I don't know if you do or not.
Yeah, and then you don't place with any of them, so you're 0 for 3.
So I just think bases. It's like this constant thing at shows. The ones that are too big, the ones that are way too small, and the ones that detract from the subject they're presenting.
We want your input on this subject, but also as you're listening, if you use a standard base or you do what you do with bases, take some pictures of just the bases and put them on the dojo to let us see what you all are doing and what you think about what we've talked about.
Bases by Bill is back with quality display bases that enhance any model. From U.S. and Japanese wooden carrier decks to custom-sized cherry hardwood bases, Bases by Bill display bases are available for any type of model and for any size. Oh, and have you heard? Bases by Bill is now a U.S. reseller for one-man army high-definition paint masks. These masks bring amazing detail to your model, even maintenance stencils. They have to be seen to be believed. And all one-man army products include free shipping. Check basesbybill.com to see the products. Bases by Bill for all your model display needs.
Well, guys, it's the Benchtop Halftime Report. I hope we've all been building something. I think we have.
Yes.
I think we have. But
Yes.
we're gonna start with Jeff. Jeff, what's the current batch build? What's the current Inch High Guy blog post build going on right now?
Well, as my typical style, I have managed to fill the bench from one end to the other. I've got 8 Japanese, mostly naval subjects on the bench. I've got a comparison build of 3 Claudes.
Fujimi, who out fine molds, and
Clear Prop is the newest.
oh, that's right, Clear Prop, Fujimi, and Aoshima.
Nichimo.
That's right.
Nichimo. When was the last time you heard that word? Nichimo.
In the 80s.
Yeah. They're all A5 M4s.
Right.
The Nichimo, I did this intentionally. The Nichimo kit was released in 1964.
Yeah.
The Fujimi was 91 and Clear Prop was 2022, something.
Yeah,
It's a
something
very
like
recent
that.
kit.
Yeah.
To me, it was interesting to compare how things have evolved during that period. I mean, the Nichimo kit is almost as old as I am. And I was shocked when I got to looking at that thing. It has got recessed panel lines and recessed rivets in 1964.
I was going to say, for the time, it was very advanced. It was not your typical 1964 Frog or Airfix kit.
Yeah, now it's not finessed. It doesn't have a cockpit. The engine looks like a washer that you'd put your dishwasher together with or something like that.
Yeah.
A lot of the details are kind of improvised, and I don't know if they just didn't have good references then or not. It's not nearly as finessed as the later ones, but I was surprised at what was there as far as surface detail goes. The Fujimi kit from 91 goes together very well. It's still a quality kit. The Clear Prop, of course, is just incredible. It's one of the state-of-the-art kits. It's got PE, it's got masks. Surface detail is just exquisite. The fit is some of the best fit I've ever seen on a kit, but it's interesting to compare those 3.
Although the downside of the Clear Prop kit is the cost.
The cost and the complexity. There are more parts in the cockpit of the Clear Prop kit than the entire box of the other 2.
Wow.
So enjoyment for the dollar.
Well, that's one way to look at it. I think there's a balance between ease of buildability, and detail. And I think you can go too far with the detail at times, especially when you start getting into PE switches and levers in your cockpit that you'll never see again. And, there's more of them in my carpet than are in that cockpit. I'll tell you that.
I hear you.
Yeah. I've also got 2 roof zero float planes on the bench. They're the Hasegawa kit. Hasegawa makes a great kit, everything you'd expect. Those are coming along. I've got 2 Fujimi Jills from the 1980s. And you guys were talking about the Albatross kits in your last episode.
Yeah.
I have 2 of those kits, both of which were Shelf of Doom kits at one time or another. I have no idea how old the oldest one is. What I do remember distinctly is I broke the canopy on it and had no way to fix or replace that. So it was back in the box. The other one I managed to foul up. I scratch built a cockpit and I managed to get it the wrong size and not quite accurate. I was going off some some perspective views in Makesh's Japanese cockpit or Japanese aircraft interiors.
Yep.
And I could not wrap my head around what I was seeing. You don't see the whole thing at once, but he's got it from both sides, and then you've got some pictures. And I could not reconcile the differences there, and I made a dog's dinner out of that and got frustrated, so it had to go away for a while. But I've ripped that cockpit out, built another one. I'm back on the road again with that. And then at the last minute, I added just one more, as I tend to do, and it's the Japanese copy of the Kellett autogyro,
Yes.
the Kayaba. I'm not sure how they pronounced it, but it's an interesting kit. It's fine molds kit, an interesting subject. It was actually used by the Japanese Army as an artillery spotter, and it flew off a Japanese Army aircraft carrier in the anti-submarine role.
Can you explain to me why the Japanese Army has an aircraft carrier and is doing anti-submarine work?
Well, it's kind of the situation the U.S. found itself in at the beginning of the war. The submarine problem had gotten to the point where it was so out of hand that anything that could carry anti-submarine ordnance or serve in an observation role was being pressed into service. I mean, we did the same thing with the B-18 and various other obsolete types. And if you're in a non-challenged aerial environment, you can get away with obsolete types looking for submarines.
Well, and I was surprised at how many of those were built and used by the Japanese. I thought it was very, very niche, and there were a lot more of those built than I had thought.
Yeah. And the Japanese Army had developed a landing ship that's very akin to the LHAs and LHDs of today. They had a floatable well deck. They had a roll-off ramp that could be lowered down onto a pier. The floatable well deck could hold, I think, 22 of the 14-meter Daihatsu landing craft.
Yeah.
And it was made for amphibious assault. And the aircraft deck was an afterthought and very useful for light aircraft and the autogyros to conduct the anti-submarine mission off of. So it was basically a landing ship. Now, most references will categorize it as an aircraft carrier, as an escort carrier of some type, but it was actually originally intended as a landing ship and had a well deck in it. So that's my bench.
By the way, we do need somebody to do a new Judy series.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So, Mike, how about you?
I've been working on a couple of things, man. The little flak panzer.
Yep.
I've reprinted the fenders for that. I've got them on. I've got the whole thing primed again. The lower basic hull assembly's been primed again. On my prints for the fenders, I got some mold lines. I'm trying to go back and use a lot of dilute Mr. Surfacer 1500.
Yeah.
To kind of mitigate some of that, and I'm only on my second application of that, and it's working out pretty well. We'll see if I can fill up the defects, how much detail I have left. That'll be the challenge. I think it's going to work out though. On the KV-85, it's all the just detail work. I've been working on the whole front, the glacis and the front fenders. I've got the front fender supports installed. I've got a bunch of weld seam work I've done on the bracketing for the front fender supports. And it's just going to be a progression, working from the nose of the tank all the way to the back to add all this stuff. So, TJ Howler was giving me some grief about not having it done for amps. It's not going to be done for amps. And this is why. It's just all this tedium to get through this thing that, it's a typical project of my past, if that makes sense to you, Dave.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work, and it's just going to have to, I'm going to take my time and work my way through it, but it's going to be the model I want in the end. Amps 2025 be damned. It's just going to, it's going to get done when it gets done.
But it'll be there for Amps 2026.
No, I'm not even going to say that.
Oh yeah, you're building you are going to build faster. You're going to build faster. You're finished one this year already.
Maybe I am. I don't know.
You're going to get some stuff done faster. So am I. That's part of how we get better.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So that's my bench top.
Well,
Jay, what's yours doing, Dave?
Well, mine is filled with a trio of F8Fs that are all together. It's a mini inch-high build, trying to get at least two of these done for the Nationals for our group display, the September's group display. The kits are together, now doing I'm going back. I told Mike I was going super old school. I was going back with some light gray enamel and doing some dry brushing, which I know, which I haven't done in years, just to try and pop a little. So you can't see anything in this cockpit. And once I put the canopy on, you really won't be able to see anything on it. But I wanted to do something to pop it a little bit. So I've started dry brushing the cockpit areas, and then I'm going to wash them, put the canopies on, put my kit masks, F8F kit masks on. Thank you, Kevin, for getting me those at Heritage Con. And then the sucker will be ready to paint. I did get my bottle of Mr. Color Gloss Sea Blue in the mail today. And so the project's moving along really well. And I will say, Inch is correct when he talks about batch building really adding efficiency. Now, you have to be organized.
No,
but if
back up. Hang on. You said your bottle of glossy blue?
Yes, one single bottle should paint all three of these.
Oh, yeah, easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it won't.
Yeah, it will. Yeah,
Sure it will.
Yeah,
sure it will.
Jeff, yes, for you it would.
Yeah. Hey.
I guess it depends on how much of it you're planning on wearing before the end of your airbrush session.
We'll see.
We had this conversation earlier this week. That's the one thing I don't like about Mr. Color is the sample size bottle.
Size bottle.
They sell everything in.
I do wish that they were Tamiya's.
I like the big fat Tamiya bottles, but those are getting hard to find too.
Yes, I know. They're just going away from. So F8F's moving along. Inch, I really appreciate all the input you've given me, and you are correct regarding the efficiencies, but the key is you have to be organized.
Yeah, that is the key. But I am so proud of you for doing a batch build.
Well, we'll see. That's my first one.
You'll get hooked. You'll get hooked.
And these kits are perfect for that. Not for anybody to think that I've forgotten. The SAM is back on the bench, and I have started doing the tube oil treatment to the underside. I had already completed it on the top side when I had stopped to work on the Musaru. I'm hoping by the end of April that the SAM is done, but it's really close. And that's what my bench looks like.
Plastic Model Mojo is brought to you by Squadron. Head on over to squadron.com for the latest in kits and accessories, all at a great price and with great service. Are you a modeler on the go? Check out the Squadron mobile app for your Apple or Android device for easy shopping from just about anywhere. Squadron, adding to the stash since 1968.
So guys, the pace of new kits has slowed down. We're not, the first 3 months of the year, you get all of these releases announced, and man, it was a fire hose this year. But it's slowed down, but there are still new kits being announced. So, Mike, do you have some faves and yawns? We'll rotate around between the three of us. You start.
I got one fave.
Okay.
Because, again, it's been light.
Yep.
Well, my first fave comes from Gecko Models, and surprisingly, it's not a Vietnam War subject this time. They're coming out with a new British truck.
That's becoming real popular right now.
One that IBG has not done yet. This is a Bedford OYD truck, 3-ton, 4x2, wood cargo body. It looks like a good, solid, medium truck. I mean, it's going to be useful to a lot of people. Gecko, they're parent or daughter to somebody.
Right.
I can't remember who it is. Somebody will let us know. I want to say Bronco, but I don't know if that's true. It may be. If it is true, it's going to have a lot of parts. I know that. But it's a British soft skin, 3-ton truck. We're living in the best of times when you can get something like this, right?
Yep. Then you get your 35th scale Princess Elizabeth figure, and you can have her.
Yeah.
You can have her there working on the vehicle.
There you go.
Who's next?
I'll go next. I have three faves. My first fave is our good friends at SBS.
Yeah, in Hungary.
From Hungary. They have announced a 72nd scale Supermarine S4, which was the Schneider Trophy aircraft predecessor to the very famous Supermarine S6, the one that finally clinched the Schneider Trophy. But SBS, I can without even seeing the kit, I can heartily recommend it because their stuff is just so good, and I can't wait to see it. Even if it's not a particular area of interest, it's still going to be a great kit. Jeff?
Okay, I've got a few myself. My first one is in my cart at Hannon's. I had back ordered it. It is the Micro Mirror Caproni B72 Type B. And I struggled to describe this accurately. It's like a wing section with two engines on two floats. It was a proposed design as a Italian torpedo boat. It was never meant to fly. It was a wing and ground effect aircraft. So you would effectively get, I don't know, 100-knot speedboat that was a torpedo bomber. I struggle to think how to paint this thing, but it is just so cool looking, and it would give me a chance to practice some water effects.
There you
As
go.
this thing is zipping along at whatever speed it can get up to on a flat sea. It would be worthless in any kind of sea state, obviously, but it is a unique aircraft or torpedo boat, depending on what you want to call it. And it ticked a lot of boxes for me. Plus, it'll give me a chance to practice water effects. Mike, do you have another one?
Not other than noticing that Quinta Studios has entered the 3D print sphere. They've got a lot of machine guns, mostly 48 scale at this point, but machine guns and what else? They've got in 72nd scale, they got a U.S. Navy deck tractor.
Yeah,
there you go.
So
that could be useful.
That could be very useful. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do. You know, they've mostly been known for their 3D printed or 3D textured decals for cockpit interiors. So would be real curious what this stuff's going to look like because their cockpit stuff's been pretty dang good. So
yeah,
you know, hopefully it's going to be some good stuff. And you know, these machine guns, 48 scale, are they going to get a 72nd? That'd be really interesting.
Yes, it would.
Yeah.
Well, my next one is the company First to Fight.
Oh, good company.
In 72nd scale, has announced a French light tank, an AMR-35, which the French used, and I believe the Poles might have had a few. And it's your funky pre-war tankette type thing. And I just love all those. I don't know why it's unreasonable, but I just absolutely love them.
First to Fight's released a lot of stuff lately, a lot of really obscure stuff.
Yes, they have.
Well, what's their format? Is it injection molded or is it resin?
Yeah, they're injection molded. They're somewhat simplified. Usually, if a tank, you get running gear that is already all molded as one piece.
Okay.
I like the subject. That's cool.
Jeff, you got another one?
Yep. On the topic of obscure subjects, Rare Birds Models out of Estonia has a 3D print coming out, and I'm going to butcher this name, Laticore.
Laticore 631. Guess what was on my list?
That was on your list? Okay.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to wait and see if this turns out to be printed well, but it is a 6-engine flying boat. The French had one operational before the invasion.
Right.
The Germans took it over. It was strafed into non-existence. They built another one after the war. But by that time, of course, the commercial transatlantic 6-engine flying boat market had died.
Yeah.
This thing has a 188-foot wingspan. So that's 2.5 feet in 72nd scale, roughly.
I have seen not one of these kits. There was a vacuform of this aircraft. And I saw it at a show once, And it was one of the most impressive things I have. In fact, it might have been Indy a few years ago.
Well, if these guys can pull this off, I may have to spring for one of these.
Because this thing is huge. It
Oh,
is
yeah.
absolutely huge. And both the pre-war civilian scheme and the captured scheme are both cool. I mean, yeah, that tickles all the right. But at the size of it, I want to know how you do that in 3D print. Obviously, I think they'll do it in sections, but
Right. They'd have to.
I'm just not sure how you get a wing that big and that thin that doesn't have significant structural problems.
Yeah, you'd have a warpage issue with the resin, obviously,
Yeah.
and a brittleness issue with anything that's 3D printed.
Yeah.
I'd have to see if they could pull it off before I'd spring for it, but it's such an interesting subject.
You and me both. That was one of mine as well. So
Okay.
good on you.
Well, what else you got, Dave?
Oh, well, that was my last one, was the Laticore. By the way,
Okay.
did you know that Laticore still exists as a company? And they still they don't make full airplanes, but they make airplane parts for Boeing aircraft.
Huh.
And I only found that out recently when there was the subject of all of the foreign inputs into Boeing aircraft. And Laticore, I think they made gear doors or actually fuselage doors for some of the Boeing aircraft, which was weird. So, Jeff, do you have another fave or a yawn?
I've got one of each. If you want them both, I can
go
do
ahead.
both.
You give them to us both.
All right. The last fave I've got is the Edward MiG-21 is being re-released as a dual combo. It has the masks, it has the colored PE, it has a decal sheet with 10 different schemes on it, which is almost worth the price of admission in itself, in my opinion. And it is listed as soon to be released on Hannets for 25 pounds, which is roughly $30 American for two of these. Now, I've built the MiG-21, the Edward MiG-21 before, and it is a beautiful kit. It falls together.
Yeah.
And they are offering the decal sheet, the masks, and the color PE all as part of that package for two kits for $30. And try to beat that.
And if I didn't have 6 unbuilt Edward MiG-21s, I'd be hopping on that big time.
Well, I'm gonna pull the trigger on that again because it was such a wonderful experience to build the first two I built.
Dave will hop on it anyway.
I will too. Yes. Give us your yawn.
Okay, my yawn is a Platts FA-27. Now, you might ask what an FA-27 is, and being Platts is a Japanese manufacturer, you're not going to be surprised to learn that it is an anime type subject.
Yep.
And
it's cool looking.
It is unusual, and you get a keychain with this boxing. And it is inspired by a 5-episode anime called Battle Ferry Yukikaze. And I did not make that up. Imperial Japanese Navy fans will know Yukikaze was the name of a destroyer that was supposed to be the luckiest ship in the IJN. It fought in every major battle and was never hit. The Battle Ferry thing, I'm not quite sure what that's all about, but the premise is aliens are invading through some portal in Antarctica and everybody's going to fight the aliens. And this hero pilot and his AI Platts FA-27 are the stars of the show, and they go fight the aliens. So I cringe whenever a manufacturer that is able to produce a quality kit such as Platts. They are every bit in the Tamiya League, in my opinion.
Yep.
I've built their X-47 UCAS, which was the Navy drone bomber that got phased out for reasons that still mystify me. But
yep.
It was beautiful. It was a box shaker, beautiful aircraft, beautiful kit. I just don't get why they're doing something that's so fringe. And it's obviously the Japanese market.
Yeah, I was going to say, clearly home market.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have any more faves.
We're done.
This is a weak month for least 35th scale armor releases. So I'm not going to dog on anything just to dog on it.
All right.
Fair enough.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're almost at the end of the episode, and I'm at the bottom of my modeling fluid, and the Lime Ricky never disappoints. It's a very refreshing drink. It is particularly refreshing in the summer months while you're sitting out by the pool. You could drink those like you're drinking lemonade or limeade. It's just awesome. So no disappointments for me. Jeff, how was the beer?
The Blue Moon Belgian White is just exquisite. I have to really be careful with these. They are so good, and it's very tempting to go to the fridge and get another one, but
Yep.
I'm going to limit myself to one. It is a smooth beer, very refreshing. I could have these for the rest of the evening and be quite content.
Mike?
It's Bullet, man. It's good.
Yeah, really. Is there anything more to say other than go get yourself a bottle? Now we're really at the end of the episode. Want to do shout outs. If you've got a shout out to any person or group or anything, and I'll start. I want to do a shout out to the guys at Roscoe Turner. I'm glad you had an extremely successful show. Sorry, last minute I wasn't able to make it. Mike and I really want to get back to it. That show means a lot to us sentimentally because it's the first place we ever took Plastic Model Mojo and went and recorded. And it's got a special place in our heart. And I'm glad to see the show in the new venue continues to be nothing but a success. Jeff, do you have a shout out?
Well, I'll second the shout out to Roscoe Turner. Always a great show. And I want to shout out to you and Mike for putting on this show every other week. It's like having a couple guys sitting in your modeling room with you as you're working at the bench. And I've listened to every one. It gets better and better. It continues to grow. And you're providing a great service to the modeling community. So kudos to both of you.
Well, thank you very much.
Oh, shucks. All right, Mike.
Well, guys, my final shout out of the night is to all those great folks out there who have chosen to contribute to Plastic Model Mojo through their generosity. We really appreciate that. It really helps us bring the show to you, offsets a lot of our costs, and it helps us move things forward with the work we're doing on the new website. So we really appreciate it. If you'd like to be like these folks, we've set up several ways that you can contribute to the show. We've got a Patreon link, a Buy Me a Coffee. You can contribute through PayPal. You can find the links to all those avenues of support in the show notes to this and every episode. And we appreciate it very, very much. Thank you.
Yes, you really have helped. And we're in the midst of doing some upgrades, and we would not be able to do those upgrades without your support.
Well, folks, we're at the end of this episode. And Dave, as we always say,
so many kits.
So little time, Dave. Jeff, thanks for joining us for this episode. It's been a pleasure having you here.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thoroughly enjoyable.
Sad we didn't get to meet you up at Indy, but I'm sure you had a good time.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I hope we can all meet up together at the next one and definitely try to make Louisville this year, if nothing else.
Well, guys, we'll see you next time, and maybe we'll see it at our show, Jeff.
Absolutely.
All right.
Won't miss it.
Thanks for joining us.
Right.
Thanks for having us.